Great, wonderful. So I'll just introduce Luis briefly. Luis works in a chemistry department. He's very interested in innovation, but also very interested in the acquisition of scientific knowledge by young people and how language is involved in this. And this is what he's going to talk to us about today.
Thanks very much, Tim. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for accepting not my intention either. This is a lunch talk. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. My talk bridges a little bit with Joanna's talk, but on the hard side of things, not on the bright stars, outreach sciences ago, without white coats and field. Oh, this is great. No, I was in secondary schools. I've got a small child of about 6. She's learning science, and some things don't make lots of sense. So this is very much about what it is, language of science. It's about young learners, scientific literacy and cultural models, because science itself it's a culture. So let's see how this can be done. So I'll start with my introduction. My first part and the most of my presentation is about improving scientific literacy, and it relates a little bit with how languages can support us in our learning of science and how scientific language bridges into everything else in our languages. And in culture, the science and the culture itself, how can it support learning? And then I'll come to my conclusion. So my introduction, my background, I'm a native speaker of Portuguese. I've learned English at an early age, Spanish on TV, formally, etc. So I've learned all of these languages formally at some point in my life. So German, Italian, and French. I've learned Mandarin Chinese, but I can't speak, sorry guys. I'm really grateful we're here, and yeah, I was probably the last time I had the opportunity to speak multiple languages at the same time was in a pub. So now we're in a different place, more formal in the conference, speaking different languages, and that's really exciting. So that's what I share with everyone of you. So I was researching in Spain, in Cadiz. There I learned Spanish notably, and I'm a big fan of the carnival over there. So it's Cadiz in southern Spain, not Cardiff in Wales. So I was in Italy, in Florence, and in Belgium I was in Namur. I would be grateful to have been in Brussels. That would allow me to learn a little of Dutch or Flemish if you want. And I was a teacher of science in Morecambe. And I taught chemistry over there for about 1 year, and then I came here. So that's pretty much my background. Now, the aim of the presentation is to show how a good understanding of languages, how words are made notably, can support with learning science, and to show how culture and cultural preferences. So it's pretty much a matter of whether you like it or not, and whether you prefer it or not. It's about whether you're a Man United or Liverpool supporter. And that's what could make the difference. That's what those outreach officers go in there and say, and bring them to their supporter field, so to say. So how this culture and cultural preferences has got a strong influence in learning science. So improving scientific literacy. So making meaning of foreign words. We are all learners of languages. How do we make meaning of them, of these words? So photosynthesis is pretty much a Greek word. So it's made of 3 particles. Photo, that means light. Syn, that means with or together. And thesis, setting, putting or placing things together with the aid of light. So, by the way, I forgot to mention pretty much all the information I'm going to present is present in a report by the Education and Endowment Foundation called Improving Literacy in Schools. And science is always there, by the way. So one basic principle is that less is more. So the way I've done it right now could be an interesting way to teach someone how this word is formed, what does it mean, and this strategy of breaking the word down into its different parts could be an interesting way to replicate to everything else. Now, the morphology was just what I've done by breaking it down into different parts, and then the etymology is the origin of it. Okay, so the Greek part of it. Most of prefixes and suffixes are also very interesting, notably for units. If you're thinking about meters, grams, if you put different particles at the beginning, so prefixes, you can say nano, kilo, and all those things will have a meaning, and then you'll be able to do your make a get your own conclusions from where these words come from and what they mean. So those systems, those languages are very particular for measuring and for science in general. They can be learned by using very simple linguistic strategies that for us as language learners are very easy, but not as much for a small child. Okay, so that's small or not so small. Yeah, that's the main point. Now, so again, making meaning of foreign words, there should be relevant links between subjects and false friends. For instance, let's talk about climate change. It's taught, for instance, in geography. It's taught in science. It should not mean different things, although in exams, students are required to give different answers. So those things have similar meanings, but those meanings are not always clear for everyone. So a good example in science, trying to making meaning of foreign words, is a good confusion that could arise is the relationship between hydrocarbons and carbohydrates. This is taught generally when we speak about healthy diet. This is taught when we speak about polymers. And yeah, there could be confusion over there. Now, another one in chemistry, a word very related to structure, and this is an easier strategy to use. It's this, not that. That's a lot more straightforward to teach. So we're talking about a lattice, which is a network of organized particles, yeah, in a particular shape. We talk about a lattice, and if we tell our students it's not a lattice, that will bring them to their minds that we're talking about that and not that one. That will help with spelling, with a good understanding of what things are, and at least that will give them good marks. Another one that I used before was Avogadro. So it's a very well known concept in chemistry, which is not an avocado. And my students said, what's the avocado doing over there? No, it's not that. And that's a very interesting way to help students remind of a foreign word. This one definitely a foreign word, but for them, for a student who's learning something for the first time, lattice is a word from their own language, their native, but is as foreign as Avogadro. And that's something we need to be aware of. Now, in order to make meaning of foreign words, we can talk about vocabulary tiers. So up to now, those very specific words belong to this very high tier, subject-specific vocabulary, for instance, photosynthesis in science. So tier 3, the highest one, this is pretty much what we talk about in science, our very particular culture, if you want, our jargon. Our tier 2 words are high-frequency words found in many different subject disciplines. They are more transversal to everything we learn and teach. And then tier 1 is the common chit-chat that we can do, but sometimes we also write, okay? And that's familiar for most of the students. When we teach basically this and that tier at the top. Something I've been advised to use during my training was the Freya model. I never found it very useful, but it's something that's very recommended. It's basically linking a word, a meaning, and their representations. For instance, a cube. What does it mean? Well, it's a cube. It's a shape with as many faces as it could have, etc. Then you show the shape of a cube, and you show some uses of the cube. Never very useful for me, and it was recommended for me when trying to tell the difference between iron and ion. So that was for me, it was more important to learn the pronunciation, not to mislead my students than to do anything else. So in my mind, with iron and ion, I've drawn a conceptual map. All that abstraction was in my mind with a conceptual map, and I found those very useful. Now, something that we also can do is strategic reading. Now, this is a well-known article by Barnowski and Lindsay, very important subject, our mass extinction. Wow, what's going to happen? So when we come to read something, either in science, in a foreign language, we will go there with a prior knowledge. And it could be a knowledge of our language. You see a picture, what does this relate to? Now, we can do bridges here. Now, it can be in our native language. It's okay. If it's our foreign language, we'll do exactly the same. We go there with our luggage, so to say, and we look at a piece of written text, and we'll go there with our prior knowledge. Then we'll predict what it means. We'll start asking questions. We'll try to read and clarify what's over there, and at the end, hopefully, we'll be able to summarize. Okay, and this strategic reading is useful for learning languages and for learning science. Now, at this point, we go to something called disciplinary literacy, and this is more specific for science and for any specific subject we might be learning. Now, whenever we speak and we write, we do it with a purpose. Now, in science, for instance, it's not very important to do it in full sentences. Now, in English, teachers will say, yeah, you need to write in full sentences. You get the full marks if you don't write in full sentences for the most of the situations. Now, again, disciplinary literacy is also about extracting relevant information and summarizing what I've just said. It's about creating rich oral and written language environments. This relates to what Joanna and what I'm going to say next. We are very privileged to be here and to be able to speak different languages with people that recognize a similar interest. And these opportunities are not always given to students in their lives. So the role of teachers and outreach officers is to help create these rich oral and written language environments. Okay, and these opportunities to hear, read, and use new words in the classroom, they should be there all the time. And they are often foreign words, words that we're learning and we need to use in a meaningful and rich way. Now, what is this all about? Science and culture for learning. So we're talking about a particular set of words that we use with a specific meaning. And that ultimately, with the use and with the community we constitute, that constitutes a culture. Now, we go to school and we learn starting from our previous knowledge. We are not empty vessels at the very beginning of our learning. And this illustration gives you a bit of an idea of why this talk relates to what Joanna was saying. There is a cultural capital that allows you to go further when you start at your starting point. Now, in science, we've got a great influence of a few languages. They are Greek. Formulae sheets are full of delta, for instance. In English, it's translated as variation, but it's not always well understood by students. I mentioned for the first time, and it was difficult for students to understand, and they were a high ability. Now, Latin is very well common in systematics in biology. Now, French culture, German culture, Arabic and Chinese are very well understood in science either, and they are there all the time, even if we don't recognize it immediately. Now, all this generates big and important cultural clashes, and most importantly, we need to be able to avoid alternative ideas. And this is a big issue. If these concepts, if the concepts of the foreign concepts we teach are not well understood, we can have misconceptions as we can refer to these alternative ideas either. And that's something we want to avoid. That's why learning language is important. That's why the awareness of foreign words is important in science. Ultimately, all this relates to something called cultural capital, which is a very well notion proposed by Pierre Bourdieu, a French social scientist, by the way. And this is defined as the familiarity with a legitimate culture within a society. So familiarity with science depends largely on the deep understanding of what the words mean and what that language and that particular system, how that particular system can be used in our lives. So familiarity, affection, a like and not a dislike, hopefully. Just to conclude, so learning languages helps making meaning of new words in different subjects. That's a pretty important conclusion in my talk. Now, making meaning of these new words will generate, hopefully, familiarity with our with relevant cultures, and this familiarity will provide better opportunities in life. Thanks very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Louise. I like the way you've killed two birds with one stone at the end by showing how that by learning languages, you can familiarize yourself with new subjects, but by looking at the subjects, you can familiarize yourself with other cultures. So thank you very much for a very refreshing as a talk, and something we haven't covered yet in this conference is how can we exploit, languages in order to teach people, and we have some, are there any questions for Louise? thank you very much for keeping time so effectively as well.
I was expecting it.
Right. So yes. Questions. Oh yes. I see. Yeah, my father has another question. Please go ahead.
No question.
No question. Okay. Okay. It's just hand up. Okay. Okay. Well.
There is one now.
Oh, there is one. It's from Joanna Mokos.
Hello. Yes, so just reflecting also a little bit on this, the importance of culture and the link between culture and languages. I think Luis touched in a very important point, which is how we can make learning culturally relevant and how, like, how this impacts effectiveness of the teaching or of the learning process when we make learning culturally relevant. This more, it's just this comment actually.
Yes. So
Thank you.
yes. Well, do you want to respond, Luis, or shall I comment on the comment?
No, it's fine. I think Joanna has touched a common point.
I mean, a point that's come up a lot today is this sort of starting with Richard's talk in the morning was this idea of the false dichotomy between either science or either languages and cultures, and this sort of fork in the road which shouldn't actually exist. It's all in our minds. Really, culture is part of science, and affect science. Science is part of culture. Same as science and languages also influence each other, as you showed in your talk. So basically, I think we're all pleading for a more holistic, approach, and to exploit, our background in languages when teaching science or doing science, and again, using our science knowledge to help sort of teach people sort of languages. Yeah. And also, my hope is that you talked about talking so many languages for the last time in the pub. My hope is that this should happen at universities all the time, not just under the influence of alcohol, because although but because we're such actually a a multilingual place, an international place, but for some reason that doesn't seem to be recognized, as much as it could be. This is one reason actually why about conferences. Conferences are great places because you can talk about so many in so many languages at a conference, and you always have something to talk about. But the science. Are you familiar with there was a polyglot called Moses McCormick, whose nickname was Lao Shu Usher, or Lao Shi, which means the mouse 55,000. But I mean, he could speak over 50 languages, but he was really good in actually, just starting conversations with people in all the languages he spoke, in shopping centers. And I think he would have found conferences, had he been a scientist, he would have found it wonderful. But I definitely recommend checking out his method, so Moses McCormick, because he. Even his hometown of Columbus, Ohio, which you don't think of being as a metropole, he spoke about 50 languages with all the immigrants there. And if you go to Lancaster, I mean, Lancaster is not monolingual by any means. I mean, you can easily speak here on the campus, I think, about 50 languages if you can. So I mean, why don't I suppose what I'm trying? This is a long-winded way of saying, don't keep languages in the pub. They should be, we should be really, using them all the time, and I hope that's something that can change. Right. Well, okay. In that case, thank you very much to all the speakers of this session. At 1 o'clock United Kingdom time, we will be continuing with Lundi Boytes, who will be talking about languages, and design. I saw a talk that she gave on that in the past I think it was a polyglot conference. It is, that was really good. So I would definitely recommend that you stick around, to hear her. So apart from that, please, everybody who's online, go ahead, keep chatting, with each other. We can stop the recording now. Yes, just go ahead and chat with each other, sort of network, have a good time online together, and we'll start again in half an hour.